Welcome to You Are Intuitive, a refreshing series of down-to-earth conversations about developing and using intuition in the real world. I am Dana Mahachek, and my guest today is the incredible L'Erin Alta. L'Erin is a soul guide, shadow diver, and spiritual teacher known for burning down the stale, fluffy, boring self-help formulas and helping women to ignite true spiritual liberation. Her workshops, retreats, and one-on-one intensives have been called transformation temples for unruly, soulful women. L'Erin believes that loss, grief, and pain are healing initiations, and that if honored, they will fortify you, bringing you through the shadows into the light of your soul. Using movement, meditation, ritual, art, and ancient spiritual practices, L'Erin guides women deep into their spiritual journey, helping clients to surrender their facade, shed their fears, and finally come home to themselves. If you were to read L'Erin's resume, it would include Microsoft, nonprofits large and small, as well as a 5-year stint as a Mac makeup artist. But what should really be there are the 23 countries where she studied healing in backwater ashrams, jungle temples, and mountain monasteries, working with spiritual teachers, medicine women, and shamans from many faiths and spiritual paths to learn about trauma, healing, and transformation. The essence of L'Erin's work is distilled to freedom, supporting you in finding it, cultivating it, living it, because your power is in this moment, in this breath, in this one courageous, against all odds, courageously true, yes. It was a massive privilege to speak with L'Erin today, and I am so thrilled that you are tuning in. Thank you so much. Hi, L'Erin. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm super stoked to speak with you.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm really excited. Thank you for having me.
So to start off, I always like to ask the most obvious and counterintuitive question to begin.
Okay.
Do you consider yourself to be an intuitive person?
Oh, absolutely. I do. And I think that we are all intuitive. So I particularly consider myself to be very in tune with my intuition.
And has that always been the case? Have you always been really plugged into your own intuitive capacities?
Yes. But when I was a child, I didn't know. I didn't have a name for it, and it didn't feel distinct or particularly interesting. It was just a way that I knew. It was, like what temperature it is, or what today is, or what your name is. It was just another vehicle that I had for knowing. So it wasn't until I got older that I realized everybody didn't know what I knew, and that my intuition is very strong, but it's also part psychic. So I would know things, like I would know what people were thinking, or I would ask a question in my head that someone would answer, or I could feel people's sensations in my own body. And so that was like, oh, this is a little different, but I didn't think it was odd. I was just like, okay, this is more information about the world.
So that was going to be my next question about that, with when you're sort of awakening to the fact that not everybody thinks the way you do, or feels the way you do, or knows what you know. Whether that was like a weird thing that you were like, I need to cover up this part of myself, or whether it was something that was still just naturally like, this is who I am, and I'm not gonna be anybody except who I am.
Yeah, it was the option number 2. I didn't feel other or different. And part of it's because I come from a family of people who had their own psychic abilities. And so it was very much just a daily part of their way of knowing and moving through the world. My mother will tell stories about her mother and her grandmother who have strong psychic abilities. So even though I hadn't really come into my gifts young, it was just a part of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So I never felt like it was strange or like that I was evil or demonic or, I never had any of those sensations. I wasn't taught necessarily to like meditate or activate it in a specific way, but I never othered myself for it either.
Mm-hmm. Which is really beautiful, because I know both from my own personal experience and with many of the people that I've worked with, it's there is a sense of it being, in some cases there's a sense of intuition being wrong or bad or evil, but there's also just the fear of like coming across as crazy or not normal. So it's really nice to hear of somebody who experienced it as like, this is just cool, this is who I am.
Right.
Very refreshing to hear that, as a matter of fact. And now, what are some of the ways that you personally connect to your intuition or cultivate your intuition? Do you have specific practices for that?
Yeah, part of it is I have a daily meditation practice, which is at least, I like to meditate at least an hour a day, sometimes more. And so that sometimes messages or information comes in that way, but more so than getting distinct information, it calms my brain. I think it's like a soul cleansing is what I think of. It's just like a washing. And if I go a day or two without meditating, I can feel way more static and congestion in my body, in my mind, in my energy. So at minimum, it's just a way to like be able to receive whatever messages or insight are coming to me. Mm-hmm. And then I think the other thing that just helps me strengthen my intuition is listening to it, is following it, is not questioning it, is just trusting it, even if I don't understand why I'm trusting it or what it's saying, in even the most minuscule and teeny and tiny ways, which helps me. It's like a muscle, essentially. You build it, the more you use it. And so listening to it, and I mean, it's gotten down to really minutia things. And so just like being able to do the teeniest things helps me trust myself to listen to it even more for the bigger things.
Yeah. And I think there is this misconception that, being intuitive or receiving intuitive insights, that it's only going to be about these like big crossroads, like do or die situations.
Right.
But in my experience anyway, it's like you say, the minute, everyday, totally doesn't matter kind of experiences where you will get like just a subtle knowing or a subtle feeling about something, and then adjust or take action accordingly, that it's not always this like fanfare experience.
Totally. And it for me, and I know everyone experiences intuition differently, but for me, it comes often as a feeling in my body. Sometimes it's like a thought or a wind. It comes through, like, it feels like a wind going through my brain. And it's like a breeze. And I can hear, it's like it just says something and it goes through, and then I listen to it. Or I'm thinking specifically right now of a time I woke up and I was working at Microsoft and had not done a project that I was supposed to have done because I just was miserable and was procrastinating. And I woke up early in that morning, and it was just like, I knew I had to finish this project because my manager hadn't really checked up on me to see if I had done it or not. Mm-hmm. And I woke up with this sense of, you have to finish this right now, L'Erin. Do it. And I was working from home, so I just did it. I beasted it out for like 4 hours. And then I got an email that like right after I finished it from my manager, who was saying, thank you for finishing this project. So it was like, I knew that it was time, that I had to do it, that the gig was up and that I had to do it. So things like that also give me confirmation that I'm on the right track, that it's not leading me astray, so that in situations where it feels more dangerous or it feels bigger, that I can trust that same voice to lead me in the right direction.
For sure. And just just like you're saying, amassing enough experience and enough kind of practice with it, it's like you build up your own database of, whether you want to call it evidence or proof that it works, that you can actually trust it. But in order to build up that that database, you have to do something with it. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I was speaking with somebody else in the series, actually with Layla, and she was talking about how so often in our culture that we're so focused on, like, we want to receive it, like we want to be this receptacle or this vessel for insights, but then we don't place as much attention or priority on, like, okay, now that I have this thing, what am I going to do with it, and how am I going to actually like put this into practice? So I like your just the thread that you mentioned about actually not only feeling it, but then taking action, doing something with what you receive.
Immediately. And immediately, because I've learned, there was a period of my life when I was experimenting with my intuition, and I was like, what if I don't listen? What if I just do what I wanted to? I was being rebellious, right? I was just, I was like, hey, whatever, I'm going to see what happens. And it never turned out well. It wasn't successful. I mean, it was successful in giving me the information, but it wasn't successful in getting me any closer to what I wanted to be experiencing, how I wanted to be living my life. And I was like, I don't really know anything. Intellect alone is not sufficient. And even my intellect, which I, appreciate.
Pretty smart.
Right. But I don't know everything. I'm not the creator. I'm not source beyond source. I'm not the divine. I'm an expression of the divine, but I don't have unlimited access to all that is to know. So why not surrender? Why not trust this other level of information that's coming to me that can't be quantified or intellectualized or checked off a box? And when I started to surrender, when I started to like defer, not just like let the messages come, but like seek them out. What am I supposed to be doing? Everything changed.
Yeah. And that reminds me of, I was actually listening to your podcast interview with Layla. I'm like, feel like I need to like draw a heart or something just to like honor her presence here. But just you speaking about being in service to something bigger than yourself, something greater. And I really feel too that acknowledging ourselves as intuitive beings and then heeding the intuitive guidance we receive, that's being of service. That is, showing up and doing the work, is realizing that you don't necessarily have to like have a plan or have a strategy or like figure everything out. It's just that willingness to like, I'm listening and I will do something with the insights I receive.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
I wanted to speak now about, because I know that you recently went through a reinvention of sorts with your business and I imagine your life at the same time. And I had heard that you had literally kind of stepped out for, I think it was 1.5 years. Can you talk about that? Because I think a lot of people listening, myself included, we're so wired to just want answers and an easy formula or like a model we can follow to like get us to success. What was it like to just step out completely from that paradigm and go within and ask yourself, who am I? Why am I here? What do I need to do?
It was fantastic. It was hard, but it was fantastic because I started doing this work, healing work, transformational work, almost 20 years ago. So 17 years ago, in person, in circles with women who needed deep work and healing and transformation. And I came into it trial by fire, but it was all in person, and then retreats in person. And then I started getting trainings and certification and everything. But the way I came into it initially was very much led by my intuition and led by grace, God's grace, Spirit's grace. Like L'Erin, this is why you're born. This is what you're supposed to be doing with your life. And I did it in person for a really long time. And then in 2010 or 2011, I discovered the internet and thought I had an online business. So I went to B school and I went to all these like online marketing classes. And I tried to squeeze all of this in-person learning. I traveled to 23 countries and worked with teachers and healers and medicine people all over the world. I tried to squeeze that into the internet. I tried to squeeze it into Facebook and online courses and Skype calls. And it took me 5 years to realize that I was attracting people who weren't the best match for me. Some of them were amazing, but some of them weren't. And it was consistent why they weren't the best match. So I'm a healer, I'm a teacher, I do spiritual work. And a lot of people who were coming to me were looking for a magic wand. They were looking for like me to sprinkle fairy dust on the situation that they were challenged with and fix it for them without them having to do the real labor of healing themselves. I'm a guide, and I was like, okay, this is not about them at all, because it's too consistent. It was the same, people were showing up the same way, needing the same things, and we weren't really hitting that stride together. They would get results. And so I had to take a step back to say, what am I doing that's attracting the same person that's not actually the person I'm here to be working with? And what came up for me is I don't have an internet business. I have an in-person business.
That uses the internet.
That uses the internet. Exactly. So once I could get clear about that, it's a whole different world. Like, I only work with people. My one-on-one intensives and my workshops and my retreats are all now in person, which is a very different business model, but I'm not location dependent. So I live in Seattle. People come to visit me in Seattle, but next year I'm going on a 5-city workshop tour. So I had to learn, how do I have in-person business that's not local, that uses the internet? So that's a different approach. So when I took this step back, it was a lot of prayer. It was a lot of surrender. It was a lot of asking. It was a lot of connecting with God, connecting with source. Like, what did you create me to do? And I had to go back to my roots. That's how I got to it. And I did have some really good long-term clients. And all of my long-term clients during this period came out of in-person workshops. They all came out of working with me in person. So it was an affirmation that I was on the right track, and an act of faith, because there is no formula for this, for what I'm doing now. There is no 10 quick tips to, how to hack it. There's nothing. I'm just like really being patient with myself, and I'm in it for the long game. I'm in it for the long haul, because this is why I'm here. It doesn't have to be a fast and dirty quick tip on how to run a business using the internet. It's like I'm learning it the same way I've come into everything wonderful in my life, by doing it.
Yeah, by fully immersing yourself in it. And that, I'm in a similar position myself too, where I realized that my business wasn't actually my business. It was like an appropriation of what I thought an intuitive business should be like, or what it should do. And even though, I was checking in with myself and like following my intuition, what I ultimately came to realize was that my intuition was like, this isn't actually quite your thing. Like, it's not, doing it this way is not for you. And so I've made minor adjustments to my business throughout the way. Because I also started with Skype sessions, and then I was like, I hate Skype. Like, I just hate it. So I'm not going to do this anymore. And then I actually stopped doing sessions, like one-on-one sessions altogether. But I'm in this space right now where I've taken all of the offerings off of my website. And I am just pulling back and tuning in and just seeing like, who am I? Like you said, why am I here? Why was I born? What work do I need to be doing? And actually the seed of this series is what came through after many months of asking and reflecting. This is what came through. Is just like, I am not this intuitive who can bestow healing or fixing or answers on anybody else. Like, I want to be intuitive with people. Yes. And I want us all to be able to just tap into and access these gifts and skills and muscles that we all inherently have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's totally my framework too. And it's part of it is probably what you're learning and uncovering and discovering and owning right now where you are too, is you're not for everybody. Yeah. There are people who are ready for what you have to offer. There are people who are ready to be intuitive with you. And there are people who are maybe in crisis or who need a more hands-on, this is what I see approach. And part of that is, like, for me, it was staying in my lane. Like, it was learning what I do best. And I'm not for the beginner. I'm really for someone who's been on their journey, their spiritual journey for a while, and has exhausted what they had access to and is ready to go deeper, is ready for some really deep soul work. So once I knew that, I had to say no to a lot of people. I had to like get clear about what I wasn't willing to do, who I wasn't willing to serve, what I wasn't, because you know, what we learn in online marketing is crisis is where you want to be. If people are like, I need this, I'm so desperate, that's how you're supposed to do business. And, you know, I don't want, crisis makes me anxious. Crisis is uncomfortable. I don't want you to be, I don't want to be your emergency contact.
Yeah.
Because you are ultimately your own emergency contact. And that's what I'm here to help you learn how to do.
Mm-hmm. When you were stepping away and just reassessing everything about your business, did you have particular ways of asking your questions or ways of praying or ways of trying to tap into your intuition?
All the ways.
All the ways.
All the ways. I pray different prayers, and I wrote, just journal, long form. I went to a 3-day plant medicine workshop, or not workshop, healing circle for 3 days. And I hadn't thought about it in a long time, except the friend who invited me came over the other day, and I was looking at the journal that I wrote during this ceremony, and I was like, everything that happened in that ceremony were like marching orders. It was like, okay, this is what you need to do. This is, because my question was, why, like, how do I get right with my work? How do I get in alignment with it? Because I knew I was out of alignment. And so going into this ceremony, it was my question. And I looked at my journal, and that first night, because it was 2 or 3 nights, the first night, it was just like, it came out, and I just wrote all 8 instructions. And I don't think I like reflected on it since then, but I knew I took it in as direction. Yeah. And I've been following it since then. And so I did whatever resonated with my intuition, whatever called me forth. And it's interesting because I had already taken a step back from my business at that point. So I didn't have a lot of money coming in. These 2 medicine people were coming from Peru to Seattle to do this work. And 3 days before the workshop, it was just like my intuition said, you need to go here. And I didn't have any money to spend. So I ran a flash sale. And with it, because I didn't know then that I was only going to be doing in-person work. So I ran a flash sale. And within the first day, I had more than enough money to go to this ceremony. So for me, it was just like following each step at a time and not needing to see the whole road, not needing to know that I was going to go to this medicine circle and I was going to get the answers and I was going to follow them. And then this is where I was, but just like trusting each step at a time to take me there. And that's part of why I'm able to do my work and able to live so deeply connected to my soul, to my truth, to my intuition, because I'm in surrender to it. I'm in devotion to it. I don't need to know. Because as I said earlier, when I thought I knew, it was not good. It was not.
No. And it wasn't actually your truth in retrospect. It was somebody else's. And I find that a lot in the online world, that other people's truth can seem really shiny, and it's like, oh, I want that. But it's not always your truth.
And quite frankly, it's probably not their truth either.
Let's be real here. Yes.
But I think people have different tolerances. They're called for different things. My path is very narrow, very, very narrow. And when I'm off, I'm off. I don't have a lot of wiggle room. There's not a lot of like flex for me. I can't pretend anything. So when I have tried to like follow formulas or scripts or other people's
5 tips,
it doesn't work. And it's quick. It's like, no, L'Erin, this isn't what you're here to do. That's cute, but it's not actually what you're here to do. So do what you're here to do. And then that brings that shifts it to a whole wide field of possibility and whole wide field of opening, which creates a business model from scratch that actually does work for me, that actually does make sense, which is it's so much more fun and creative and interesting than trying to squeeze into someone else's formula. I still learn from teachers. I still learn from people who have online businesses, but they don't have my business. I don't know anyone that has my business.
And what's interesting about it too, because now that you've found your alignment in it and you've found your resonance with you and with your business, the magnetism that you exude with that is just like so irresistible. Which is funny too, because then if there's somebody who's like, oh, well, look at what L'Erin's doing, like she's got it figured out, maybe I can use her model and try to fit into that. And it's like, it's just not going to work that way.
It's not going to work that way. And part of my intention in the rebirth was to be polarizing and magnetic. I want it to be so unadulteratedly L'Erin that the people who resonate with me really resonate with me, and the people who don't really don't, so that it's crystal clear on both sides that people know who I am. When they want to work with me, they know what they're signing up for. There's no smoke and mirrors. There's no confusion. And I met with my lawyer this week. We're working on trademarks. We're working on copywriting, because it is there is that danger. I've had people copy and paste entire sales pages from me. People who I know personally, who
should know better.
And should know better, have copied, people who've spent the night at my house, I will say that, have copied and pasted and reused my words as their own. And so I trust my intuition, I surrender, I trust God, I pray, and I have my legal butt covered too. So that, because it's people are human and make human decisions, and I want to have myself covered on all fronts.
Definitely. I want to shift gears a little bit with this discussion into the relationship between pain and intuitive awakening or intuitive activation. Because you have a quote somewhere on your website that talks about scar tissue being stronger than skin.
Yes.
And has it been your experience that the most painful points in your life have also been the most, like the biggest opportunities for your growth and your, if you want to call it, awakening?
I think pain loss, grief, all the stuff that we don't want to touch. We want to brush under the carpet, all the stuff we want to like sprinkle fairy dust on, are initiations. That's how I think of them. They're doorways, they're thresholds that we, if willing to, can cross and go into a deepening of who we are, and what life is, because it's all that, right? Like it's all highs and lows, hard and soft, dark and light. It's all impermanent. That's the lesson. And so I think, yes, I've had a lot of loss in my life, a lot of death in my life, which was really painful. It started between 19 and 24. For 5 years, I had someone in my life die every 3 to 9 months. That's a lot. That's a lot. And then a few years later, I had that same thing happen for another 3-4 years. So that was at 19 years old. My whole world was turned upside down and inside out, because most of them were my peers. Most of them were my age and were not living high risk lives. They weren't out being dangerous. This was surgeries and car accidents and drowning and all kinds of things, illness that I didn't see. And so my sense of mortality really was turned inside out. And I had to, it was very hard for years for me to come to grips with that. So I don't want to ever pretend like it was just, and then I was enlightened about impermanence and it was fine. No, it was not. It was a struggle. But I kept struggling with it. I kept asking the questions. I kept listening to my intuition. I left college. I traveled. I kept asking bigger questions about like, what does this all mean? Yeah. And finally, I got to the lesson of impermanence. Finally. So for me, it was like being willing to go into that hard stuff, being willing to sit with it, being willing to be uncomfortable, being willing to be in grief, being willing to be in pain around it and move through it. Not
pushing against it or not avoiding it, or
not avoiding it, and not like being the victim of it and just like, oh, that life is horrible and staying there either, but like using it as a passageway. And scar tissue literally is stronger than skin. 5 years ago, I had brain surgery and I have a scar on the back of my head where they had to go in and take out some of my skull and use heat on my brain, all kinds of stuff. And that has been an opening again for me. How do I find strength in my body? How do I be in this body that's so uncomfortable and in chronic pain at times? How do I learn to still be in power and surrender to that? Because I'm a workhorse. I'm a Taurus. I like to go, go, go. I can work really hard and really long. And my body sometimes is like, no, L'Erin, you need to sleep. You need to rest. Yeah. You need to put your feet on the earth. So it's been about how do I use all of those as medicine, because it's all medicine. It's all healing. Whether it feels good or it feels terrible, it can all be medicine. And the question and my quest is, how do I use it as medicine? How do I find the medicine in this?
Yeah. I've noticed with a lot of the people that I've worked with, that there is, wanting to have intuition for only the good things, and then a fear of receiving insights or guidance around, bad things. And it's almost like a barrier or an obstacle that many people experience that they don't actually want to come into their intuition if it means they're going to have to deal with this issue or this thing that they've been avoiding or like secretly just not wanting to deal with.
Totally.
Yeah. And what are, I guess, the rewards? Like, being intuitive doesn't mean that you're not going to experience pain, or being intuitive doesn't mean that your life is going to be perfect for the rest of forever and you're going to have all the answers. But for people who are like, I don't know if it's worth it, to like open myself up to intuition if it means that I'm going to have to feel some really intense feelings. I'm going to have to process some really intense experiences. What for you is the reward of listening and heeding your intuition?
Interesting. I don't think of it as a reward because not listening to myself feels like dying a slow and painful death. So and it doesn't even have to, if intuition feels like this big looming thing out there, it can just be as simple as listening to yourself.
Yeah.
And so for people who feel kind of resistance to that, it's like, and even if you don't want to listen to yourself, that's okay, no pressure, but acknowledge that you're not listening to yourself.
Yeah.
And then start there, right? That's a beginning. That's the start. That's an opening. I was in a relationship for 5 years with someone 3 years longer than both of us knew we should have been together.
Yeah.
And I was in denial. And then we both were like, this isn't really going to work, but let's just keep seeing how it goes. And then eventually it ended in a really painful and ugly way. But I knew that I should have been out years ago. That if I had really listened to myself, if I had really trusted myself, which at the time I didn't know what life was going to be like single. I didn't know what life was going to be like without 2 incomes. I didn't have an apartment set up for me. I was terrified of I'd moved all the way across the country. I had all these I didn't trust myself to make it work. And so I stayed until I had some grounding. And then I left and made a decision that felt good. So I don't beat myself up for not leaving when I knew it wasn't going to work. But part of it is being gentle with yourself in the process. This doesn't have to be perfect. There's no bow, because there are plenty of people who are numb, who are in denial, who are in relationships that look great from the outside, and they're just trying to keep up appearances. And inside they know it's not right. And so it's you don't have to throw yourself into the deep end of the pool, but start honoring that it's not right. Just start there.
Yeah.
Honor what do you need in a relationship, and not necessarily trying to fix that person, but just naming what would feel good and fulfilling, and that you're worthy and deserving of what you want. Start there. And things will start to shift when it's not about you're wrong, you're fixing this. No, begin with what you need.
Yeah.
And then things will shift. So I think when people are thinking what's the reward? It's often what's the reward of being unhappy where you are?
Flipping that around. Yeah.
Yeah. And there are some, right? Sometimes it's stability. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes it's status. But name those.
Amen.
Name them. And then make decisions from there.
I want to ask you what alignment feels like in your body. How do you know physically or emotionally or energetically what's in alignment for yourself?
That's a great question. I'm trying to feel what I'm feeling and articulate it right now. So,
I know it's the thing with a lot of these intuitive things. It's you just know. Right. You just feel it, right?
Everybody's different.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. But for me, emotionally, it feels bright. It feels calm. It feels solid. It feels clear. So even if I know something, it feels weighted, heavy, but not heavy weighted, but grounded, anchored, rooted.
Yeah.
So because I'm a very direct communicator. I'm not a people pleaser. And so even if I say something that I know is going to ruffle feathers, my sense of groundedness in my body, my sense of clarity in my heart, my sense of ease in my mind, outweighs people's discomfort.
Yeah.
And so I find solace there. And I find solace in that alignment.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned, I'm doing it. I say whatever I'm saying for something bigger,
Yes.
for the bigger picture, for the bigger cause, for for our highest and best good.
Mm-hmm.
And so I trust that. And there's a lot I don't say because I don't need to say it. I really trust people to find their own answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't need to be, so I'm not saying I'm not a people pleaser, not just tell everybody, say it like it is, right? Not in that sense, but like people will come to their medicine, people will come to their answers in their own time and in their own way. And if it feels like something I'm here to give, I give it. And if it feels like something I'm not, that feels like alignment too.
Mm-hmm.
Like to really allow people to be in their own sovereignty, to be in their own autonomy, to trust them to uncover their own answers. Unless I'm asked a direct question, then I, of course, happily answer.
You're not going to withhold it. No, sorry, it's your medicine to discover.
Exactly. But if it's not the answer I need to give, or if I know they're not open to it, then I trust that it'll come in a different form and a different time.
Mm-hmm. And then on the flip side of that, that's actually a really, it's a clear description of how alignment can feel, that clarity and that groundedness, that ease. How do you know when you're out of alignment? How does it feel for you?
My heart beats very fast, not excitedly, but like, no, L'Erin, like, no, you already know that's not okay. No. And I feel a different kind of heaviness. I feel like something's on me. I feel weighted down. I feel sad. I feel responsible for someone else. And the first time I can think of this has happened in different ways in my life. Because often it comes out of a sense of fear. The choice I make if I do something that's out of alignment, it's often because I'm afraid of something. And this was maybe I was in 6th grade, and my sister is 2 years younger than me, and I went to her school dance, and there was a boy at her school dance who was maybe in the 4th grade and asked me to dance. And I was like, no, because I was scared of dancing with someone else. I'd never danced with someone else. I was very nervous. I was uncomfortable. And I felt so guilty, which is not an emotion I normally experience at all, even then or now. I don't have a lot of guilt, but I felt so mean. Like I had come out of this fear place and was wounded, that I went home, asked my sister, again, who was in the 4th grade, to get his phone number so I could call and apologize, which I did because I felt like I wasn't being honest with myself. I wasn't being authentic. I wasn't being in an alignment with myself. And I had an emotional impact on someone who was coming out of love and kindness.
Yeah.
And so that's a tiny decades old example, but I know it immediately. I know it immediately when it's a knee-jerk fear-based reaction, when it's something that doesn't feel good. I feel the impact on me as if I've hurt my own feelings for not trusting myself. And so for me, it's important to apologize immediately and do what I can to make amends if it's external, but also to myself. If I've hurt my own feelings, to make amends with myself.
And that's, again, just building your own database, right? Like trial and error, learning through experience, how it goes one way or the other, right? And I've also had experiences like that back in like 4th and 5th grade where I can still recall it instantly of like, that didn't feel good. And like, I wasn't coming from a place of integrity or alignment with my 10-year-old self.
Exactly. And of course, that's not to say don't say no. I love no. It's one of my favorite words. But it can be, it can be from love. It can be from integrity. It can be from truth. And that doesn't mean it requires supporting evidence or follow-up sentences. No can be sufficient, but it's where's it coming from? What's the energy behind the no?
Yeah. And it is a felt sense either way. You can feel it, not necessarily in the same way that you do or the same way that I do, but I think everyone and anyone who's willing to just check in with themselves can start recognizing how their own body and how their own energetic anatomy communicates alignment and integrity or misalignment to them.
Yeah. A question people often get is like, or ask me, is this my ego? Is this my fear? Is this, like, how do I know it's my intuition or just fear?
Yeah.
You'll know. Intuition is definitive. It's clear. And fear is like, I find has variables. Well, did it sound like, like there's a lot of waffling, and intuition isn't attached. It's not like, well, if you do this, then I'll, it's just like, nope, this is the answer.
Yeah. Or the flip side, if you don't do this, then, sorry, do it or else. Yeah. Intuition.
Do it or else.
Yeah. Intuition.
It's neutral. It's loving. It feels good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for everything that you shared in this talk. I'm like, I could speak to you for like 12 hours, but, but I know that this will be a really good starting point for people and a really good kind of jumping off position to tap into their own intuition and just have the courage to know themselves and to trust themselves and to start seeing how intuition operates in their own lives as well. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This has been such a fun conversation. I really am grateful for you and the work you're doing in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.